Hello and good evening once again to Resurgence News. And this evening we've got a really special guest who I'm so pleased has agreed to come on. Mary Ellen Moore is an activist and a filmmaker, if I can call that, film producer, filmmaker from the United States. And you are joining us this evening, Mary Ellen, to talk about all things political, all things, how could I put it? All things that are changing, perhaps, in the world. So, Mary Ellen, before we start, because obviously we've invited you on to give us a US perspective on what's happening politically, happening in the world. But before we start, can you give people a little bit of a background, a short background as to who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Yes, of course. I've had a very interesting life. I was raised in the Midwest part of the United States in Minnesota. I always want to make sure people know where that is. It's in the northern part of the United States. And I was born and raised here, and I had the opportunity after college, after a couple of years of college, I got married and I went with my husband to Southeast Asia toward the very end of the Vietnam War. And because I was also raised by very politically aware parents who really were tuned into what was going on in the world, I came out of Vietnam and Thailand area with a very different perspective on what is really happening in the world. And on top of that, when I was in Thailand, I had a vaccine injury courtesy of the United States Air Force. So that started me also on another leg of my journey into big pharma and healthcare and health and nutrition and alternative medicine, which I like to call original medicine. So I had the opportunity to interview with a major airline, and who eventually we merged with Delta Airlines, who I know everyone in the UK is familiar with. And I had a wonderful career there of 34 years, while at the same time remaining an activist and a researcher. And after I left the airlines and retired, I had the opportunity to become a partner in Free Mind Films, which we have 3 films under our belt. The first is A Noble Lie, about the Oklahoma City bombing that happened in 1995. Timothy McVeigh, I'm sure it was under the Clinton administration, so I'm not sure if everybody over there remembers that, but it's a very significant...
I do. I remember. I'm sure people will remember, yeah.
Right, and as with many of these events, things are not always what they seem, and things are not always what we are told. And the second film is about the state of mind, the psychology of control, about how we are controlled by education and media. And our third film is my favorite, because I work harder on that one than any of them, is called Shadow Ring, about basically who runs the world, who's behind the scenes with everything, and basically all the false flag wars that we've been lied into for the last 120 years, and history on the world wars and the Council on Foreign Relation, which has a counterpart in the UK called the Royal Institute of International Affairs or something like that. I'm having a little brain fart here. But most people don't understand that there are much deeper things going on behind the scenes with names that we have never heard of. And my goal in life has just been to make people aware, to plant seeds so they start thinking critically.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, Marilyn. So that's quite a sort of different, very background that's given you all this sort of different perspectives. And I really want to touch on what you just talked about with your latest film. Is it 2015?
Yes.
The one that you just mentioned that we'll show a clip of shortly, and we can talk about that because I think it's so important. But before I get to that, if I may, and I know we sort of discussed prior that we wanted to talk about this, I think the reason that we got to know each other, obviously through a mutual friend as well, was because of lockdown.
Yes.
And obviously we, in the United States and the UK, most countries actually, we all had a very similar experience in terms of what was happening and what they did to us. So if I can link that, if I may, to what you said about Vietnam, and you had to have a jab? and that kind of awakened you. If we can just go back to that again. So what was the jab for, and what happened?
Well, it's kind of my fault, my stupidity, because back then the military wasn't even giving as many jabs as they are now. But this was 1973 to 1974. I was very young. I turned 21 over in Thailand. And so I stupidly went into the base in Louisiana and said, hey, I'm going to Thailand with my husband. What shots do I need? And they go, oh, well, you should get this, and this. Oh, okay. So I stuck out my arm. I got about 5 things. And to be very honest with you, I really didn't need any of those to go to Thailand. Had I been going to Africa or certain places,
they were just recommended jobs. You didn't have to have them.
I didn't know, because I was a spouse. I technically wasn't supposed to go over there. This was a war zone. But because I was going over on my own dime, and there were other wives over there, and we had a place off base, and my then husband had his place on base. But what happened was, after I'd been over there for a few months, I went on base, and because they told me, now make sure you get a cholera booster shot. And I went in, got the cholera booster shot, and within 12 hours, I was sick. I mean, really sick. And I wasn't supposed to be over there. And they had to get the wing commander out of bed in the middle of the night. And they scrambled a C-130 and flew me down to another Air Force base in Thailand, because where we were wasn't set up for major surgery. And I, believe it or not, I had to have my appendix out. But both doctors, and this is interesting, both doctors, the receiving internist and the flight surgeon, said, we think you're having a reaction to the vaccine. And I did research later on, and yes, having your appendix get infected or burst can be a side effect of vaccine injury, just as an FYI to everyone. So that started me on my journey there.
That's quite shocking, isn't it? And
Yes.
at that time, so obviously the fact people immediately could see, logically, this is a reaction, whereas now obviously there's that, we'll talk about that in a moment, in terms of people seeing things that way.
Yes.
Was that the first time, that you'd come across this subject, that jabs can be dangerous, or had you heard anything before that?
No, I didn't know, but remember, I was born in the early 50s, and they weren't doing infant vaccines back then. There was no such thing. So my first experience was with vaccines, jabs, were when I was probably 5 years old. We got the polio, and I had a couple polio. We did the sugar cubes and stuff like that. But to me, the key, and what I've learned in my studies, is that the infant vaccines are the ones that usually sets people on the road to either chronic illness or even, something more severe than that. Because, it's like, okay, so you're going to say God didn't give us any kind of an immune system, and mother's milk, including the colostrum, is one of the best things to set a child on having a healthy gut and a healthy immune system. And it was Dr. Wakefield, who I'm sure you heard of, that got involved. Do you remember Dr. Andy Wakefield? He's been
I'm very familiar with him. I think a lot of people listening will know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. And he was the one years ago that figured out, he was a gastroenterologist. So he was noticing that these vaccine injured kids had horrible guts. Well, what happens, the mercury and aluminum kills all the good microbiomes in the gut, and parasites can grow. I mean, there's no end to, it's not just autism, it's many, many chronic illnesses. It just destroys the immune system. It really does. So, unfortunately, kids born after 1990, that's when the mass baby and childhood vaccination schedule started. And then Reagan in 1986 helped sign the act that gave protection to all the big pharma companies so that they could produce their vaccines and not worry about getting sued.
Right. So that's interesting, isn't it? So 1990s, would you say that was kind of where it really changed then? Where it kind of moved to them being able to get away with these things a lot more, and the lack of sort of regulation and safety.
Right.
What changed then, in the sense of these big pharma? Why were they more powerful, do you think, in the 90s? Because obviously this goes back, doesn't it, with jobs? It goes back to, which I could see on the clip of your film, it goes back to, is it the Rockefellers and the
Yes,
Rockefeller
it,
Institute in
it,
America?
it,
Yeah.
it goes way back because you have to remember, and this is why I say history is so important. And I was very fortunate years ago to meet a man who named Eustace Mullins, and he's written a lot of books on the New World Order, but he wrote a wonderful book called Murder by Injection. And this was back in the early 80s. And he gives the whole history of Rockefeller medicine and how they did away with original medicine, and the American Medical Association was formed. And they really got rid of all the quack doctors who really were not quack doctors, but because a lot of the original medicine was based on petroleum products, which is what the Rockefeller business was. So he hired a guy named Abraham Flexner to go around the United States and gather information as to how they were going to do away with the early, herbal medicine and holistic medicine. And I want to upfront say, I am not against conventional medicine. I really believe it has its place. I really, truly do. But we've allowed it to be the arbiter of all chronic illnesses. There's no such thing as prevention anymore. And there's no such thing as, they don't tell you to get vitamin D and sunshine. They tell you to take this pill and get this jab.
No, absolutely. I think most people listening to this will agree with you. It's although there are some that feel that we need to go completely down the holistic route, but I'm more with you, Mary Ellen, in the sense of I still think there's a role for modern medicine, modern intervention, but it's just that it's gone too far, and it's gone beyond treatment to help people. It's now being used, and we'll come onto this in a moment, it's now being used for all sorts of other nefarious, if I can use that word, reasons. But so you had that experience in your formative years, if I may say so, that really sort of set you on this path to being a skeptical of jabs. And then obviously you sort of got into this career working with an airline, which that must have been, were you quite young when you were quite young when you did that, when you worked for?
Well, yes, mid-20s I got hired. I mean, there's people that get hired at 20. I flew for 34 years, and it gave me the opportunity to, not only travel all around the world, not everywhere, but a lot of places, and get to know people. And Mark Twain had a great quote about travel. I can't think of what it is right now, but people who don't travel, I think, really miss out. I think we really grow our frame of reference and understanding that really people are people wherever we go, and we all kind of want the same thing for ourselves and our families and our children, that sort of thing. So
so you have this amazing opportunity and a career.
Yes.
Working on an airline and seeing the world, meeting lots of different people. So would you say that has helped you see things differently as well as you've got older? Has it made you see the world differently and look at your politics and how you see what we're going to talk about, this idea of a global kind of order, if you like, or New World Order as it's called? Has it helped form that view that you have, do you think?
Yes, I mean, it added to it. I mean, I think a lot of my views were already formed, but like all of us, we grow and we mature and we learn different things. And I learned to, not that I really had, a lot of prejudices in the sense of racism. It was more prejudging, because I thought, okay, this group of people's like this, and this group is, and some stereotypes are true, but it's not necessarily all negative. A lot of times it's fun and positive and interesting. Growing up in Minnesota, when I was a little kid, we didn't really have any great ethnic food even. We had my grandmother was Norwegian, and it's kind of, not that Norwegians can't cook. My grandmother was a great cook, but I didn't experience Mexican food till I went to school in Arizona. I'm like, oh, what's this? This is good. So I just think your world expands.
Yeah, so it's helped expand your world in that way. Although saying that, I mean, the UK's, we talked about this before, didn't we? The UK is always seen as somewhere with all this diverse food and culture. But I remember sort of growing up in the 80s, and it was only really, I would say, in the late 80s, maybe sort of early 90s, when there was this kind of explosion of restaurants where it kind of started to grow. I think until then it was only maybe places in London or in cities that you might find somewhere, but it's completely exploded now. So I think it's, the world has changed, and the world has changed in that way in the UK. So let's go back to that. So you've got this world perspective of different cultures, different people, and it helped change your views. But you mentioned before that you class yourself, and I think this is important to talk about when we move on to what's going on politically. You class yourself as, you say, conservative. Would you say you have conservative political, whatever that means, as we said before, conservative political principles?
Yeah, conservative fiscally. I've got some socially conservative viewpoints, but however, I am very libertarian, not the Libertarian Party that we have here, but very libertarian. I'm a big believer in the live and let live, as long as you're not hurting or interfering with somebody else. I just feel like we all have to pick our battles, and I consider myself, I think I mentioned to you, I've kind of become a political atheist, because I can say I'm a conservative, but I'm not a real big fan of the Republican Party, which is where most conservatives tend to congregate. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Have you ever supported, if I may ask, have you ever supported the Republicans, or is that just...
Yes, I did. I have supported Republicans who have been basically marginalized by the Republican Party. You've heard of our Ron Paul, who is a wonderful man and very much, wanting to end the Federal Reserve, keep us out of foreign wars.
I admire his work as well. I think he's fantastic. And it's
yes.
We'll come on to this at the moment, but we mentioned this with Martin at the beginning before we started recording. Why is it we're in this world, Mary Ellen, where you're kind of pigeonholed, you're putting a box, you're on the left, you're on the right, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, so you can't like that person, or you can't agree with that person, and it's like, right. why have we got to be like that? If someone's talking sense and they're backing it up, and there's evidence there, why can't we agree with that person? Which is why we've got to know each other, why I've talked to so many different people, why I'm working with Martin, for instance, because we haven't got the same political background. So it's so I find that, but Ron Paul's fantastic. So there's people like Ron Paul that you feel are in that Republican, but they're not, they don't fit in with the modern Republican Party, would you say?
Right. We've got, we have the establishment Republicans who are, now we call them the, I don't know, there's different names, the deep state and this and that, but both parties and the major parties in the United States have an establishment that is very difficult, that if you're a new person running for office, even if you have the money, you're not going to break through, because you will be marginalized. We had another guy years ago that I did support. I worked on his presidential campaign, named Pat Buchanan. And he was raked over the coal, called anti-Semitic, and he absolutely was not. He mentioned Israel's Amen Corner in our Congress. Well, I'm sorry. Certain things you can't speak the truth about. And this is where we have to start to be able to tell the truth without worrying about being called a racist or a bigot or anti-Semitic. Most of us are not. And we know the people who are, right? So I'm tired of it. I'm offended by it. If I don't like what Ukraine is doing, or what Russia's doing, or what China's doing, and I may like things about those countries too, but I should be able to speak the truth about what I believe, what is happening, and what people need to know.
I completely agree with you. And those names are familiar to me, because I don't know if I mentioned to you before, Marianne, obviously lockdown came and all my activism that you're familiar with put an end to my career. But I was a teacher and a lecturer for many years, and I used to teach what's called the A-levels here in the UK.
Okay.
I don't know what that's equivalent to in the States, but A-levels is what you need to get to university, basically. It's like a higher level.
School? It's for high school, the higher level high school? Okay.
Yeah, and it's I used to teach government and politics, A-level government and politics, to A-level students. I used to do it privately as well. And all colleges used to opt for the US paper. You'd get the British paper, you get 2 papers, and you'd get the US. So I always had to teach, got quite familiar with the US papers. So when you say all these names, I'm familiar with all this, like Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul. and all the sort of history of these figures. But do you agree with me, Marian? And I know, you know, we're of a different generation, but do you agree with me that you know, I think it's the same here. It has all changed in the sense of, I'm not saying that politics hasn't always been corrupt. Of course it has been. There's always been corruption. There's always been skullduggery, things going on behind the scenes, horrible stuff. But it has really changed in the sense of, and it was the words of one of our MPs here during the lockdown, actually, a Conservative MP, that said there are shadowy people in the background and we don't even know who they are. They're even admitting this, some of the MPs and politicians here. They don't know who these people are, but they know they're taking control. What do you feel? Do you feel that's what's been happening in American politics? Has that changed,
Yes.
do you think?
Yeah, I think I think that America was very different 50 years ago, 100 years ago, as your country was. But as this has grown, very, iterative and behind the scenes and big money. And I think that, how do I want to put this? It's the same, the corruption's always been there, but it's much more blatant and out in the open. And they're putting it out there now, and they're seeing if and how much pushback they're getting. What you went through with the lockdown is a very good example of that, because in my mind, we could talk about what happened here and how Trump started the whole thing rolling here on March 13th of 2020. And I'm sitting there going, we're not going to do this, are we? I mean, I was like, I at the very beginning, for a few seconds, we're like, okay, are we really in danger? What's happening? I think a lot of people were confused, and I give people grace on that. I truly do. But after a couple weeks or a month, I'm like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And you know what? The people didn't push back. And I could go into all the things that happened over the next month or two with, churches closing. Had Hillary been in charge, had she won that election and the churches closed, the people would never have put up with it. So that tells me that we go back and forth between leaders and left, right, because then the other side goes to sleep and the other side wakes up, and they keep us in this hamster wheel. Does that make some sense?
No, absolutely does. I mean, we're going to have a lot of people listening that were very happy to see Trump re-elected.
Yeah, me too.
And there's some that, like me, and perhaps you, I don't know, you obviously you can respond, that are very skeptical. What do you feel going back to, because I always say to people, let's not forget what happened during lockdown and whose watch it was on. Because in this country, I always say to people, because Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister at the time, who took us into that severe lockdown with the biggest attack on our civil liberties and our rights in this country in modern history. It really was. It was the biggest attack. He now paints himself, Mary Ellen, as this kind of saviour of the conservative libertarians. This is what these people do. And I always say to people, don't forget, he did all that to you. He was the one that was partying, getting drunk. He was telling you, you're not allowed to see your granny or your grandmother. You've got to stay locked up, where they were partying, and it's all come out and they've admitted it. So equally with Trump, what do you think was going on then? Why were people so pacified to accept this awful lockdown in the States, this big attack on America, supposed to be the ultimate democracy, the model, the beacon for the world of liberties? And you went through this. So what was going on, Marian? What the hell was going on?
Well, you are spot on. I mean, it happened at the same time in many countries, but I did keep a close eye on the UK because of you and a couple of our other friends over there. But what I couldn't believe is that there wasn't more of a pushback. There weren't more people refusing the mask. But see, I really believe, how do I say this? I don't really believe that it was an actual virus. I mean, it might have been some kind of a hyper flu or something like that, but I really believe the real bioweapon was the vaccine, the jab. That's the real bioweapon. And Trump
Yeah.
still takes credit for it. Now, I voted for him in
Mm.
2016, and I had good reasons for voting for him back then. I absolutely am happy he won this time around, because to me, it doesn't really matter. But, he, to me, is the lesser of two evils, but the lesser of two
Right.
evils is still evil.
Yeah.
I'm very skeptical. I don't trust him. I don't trust his
Mm.
picks that he put in his cabinet for many
Mm.
reasons. And I don't trust Elon Musk either. So what can I say?
No,
I'm a bad
no.
girl. So
No, you're questioning and you're being skeptical, and I will say that to people. It's not about us jumping on a right or left. Let's forget that. Let's come back to that. Let's stop doing that and just keep asking questions. Whether
yeah,
it's people from left or right, let's ask questions about. I always say, how's that person got to that position? When we live in such a controlled system that you've talked about, a system so controlled by shadowy people with lots of money, and we don't always know who they are. So we then have to ask, so why is this person, if they're such a savior of the people and they want to change things, why have they allowed that person to get there? That's what I always say, because I don't know if you want to touch on that as well, but with the vote rigging, I mean, the electoral fraud, which we know has been so documented in the States, but also here, Mariellen, we've got a big problem with it. And I would say that's got worse. Me studying it over the years, it's got worse. I mean, let's go back to this psychology again. What is it about Trump? What is it about these characters? We have someone called Nigel Farage, who you may have heard of,
yes,
who's
yes,
friends with Trump,
yeah.
who's very, he's very
he speaks truth. Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard him interviewed many times. He speaks truth on many things, and I've always been a believer that you can't listen to what they say. You have to watch what they do. And that's true for everyone. I've even had
yeah.
the opportunity to meet somebody I know probably a lot of people like you don't care for much, and that's Katie Hopkins. She came here to
All right,
Minneapolis a few years ago,
yeah.
and I chatted with her for a few minutes. And I mean, she was absolutely lovely. And many of the things she said, I
Very charming.
absolutely agree with. Yeah, just absolutely. And I'm thinking, I've always been a believer. You give credit where it's due and you call them out when they need to be called out. But I believe presidents and a lot of the other elected officials, at least here in the United States, are selected or sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that it was Trump's turn. They were going to go back and forth. And yes, I really believe the 2020 election was stolen. There's a lot of ideas on how that was done, but I will tell you one thing that I know and I would lay my life on, that creature that was president for 4 years that hid in his basement during the 2020 election, he did not get 81 million votes, which is more than Obama got, which is no one's ever gotten that many votes. And now all of a sudden, where are those 15 million votes in 2024? So however they did it, and there was several ways they did it. And it wasn't that I was necessarily cheering for Trump. I just said, there is no way that guy got 81 million votes. So, and I think for years back in 1960, they were stuffing the ballot boxes in Chicago so John F. Kennedy would win. Which, okay, that's great, but
It goes both ways.
yes,
Yeah.
it's happened forever. It's happened forever.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that to people because I've had a lot of people that like Trump say, oh, it's those Democrats, but it's like, hang on a minute. No, I mean, I remember sort of, and all the books at that, I've forgotten his name, Greg Palast.
Oh, I remember. Yes. Oh, yes. I used to hear him.
About really well researched with all the evidence there of how they stopped Al Gore, whether we like Al Gore or not. It's not, like I said, it's not about what we like. So it goes whatever way. Fraud is everywhere from every angle. And the way I see it, because I'm quite skeptical, is to me the corporate and banking and shadowy forces that we don't see.
Yes.
They're going to be constantly playing people off against each other. If they feel that maybe at this time there's these issues we want this person to push, and at this time maybe this is so it's all kind of shifting that way, isn't it? Where in the end it's always the same agenda.
That's right, 100%. And sometimes things will change. We'll get little changes and little fixes here and there. But, I don't think we should go into it now, but I mean, I've got a huge laundry list of all Trump's promises from 2016. And he was able to accomplish very little. But the MAGA people, Make America Great people, they have excuses for everything that Trump all his failures, whether it's COVID or the vaccine, whatever, they all have excuse. He was playing 5D chess. He didn't know. Well, I'm like, Mary Ellen Moore in Minnesota knew. How does Trump not know? I'm like, I don't mean to, I'm not patting myself on the back, but people like us, we have pretty healthy, and the other thing is remember, Trump was a New York Democrat for many, many years.
Oh, I was going to say about that.
He comes down that escalator in late 2015, whatever it was, or 2016, and says, I'm running for president. He puts an R after his name. Literally overnight, all the people that loved him and partied with him were against him. Like, well, how does that work? You're like, see, that shows you how evil, how corrupt politics is, how that works, because that's phony. That's really phony. And I don't know, we have others that have come back and forth. We have the mayor of New York who ran as a Democrat, but he was a policeman and a Republican for many years. And then he runs for mayor and he says, okay, now I'm a Democrat. So this is how it works.
So what do you feel that is? Does it mean that these people are not really, this is what I think, they're not really in it because they've got any true political ideals or values. They're just in it for their ego and their own self. Because let's be honest, he's not in it for the money, is he? Is it ego? What is it about, do you think?
He presents himself as very virtuous, not taking a salary and all that. He made a whole lot of money personally off of Stop the Steal while he was throwing all those January 6 people under the bus that followed him there. And, I'm not, Trump's he's into money. I don't let that fool you. I think he and his family and his son-in-law and his kids are very much into the money. And they may have some, I'm not going to accuse them of not having any good ideals. That's between them and their creator. I don't know, but what I see and what I've experienced and who the people are that support Trump, that give him the money, that give all the senators and congressmen the money. I'd like to buy myself a senator if I could. I could get a lot done if I could own a couple senators. Here in the United States, we think it's we the people. And it isn't, because you and I, we see all these people that are protesting. We don't want you to spend money on this or do this. And guess what? They go, well, oh, that's nice, but we're going to pretty much do what we want to do because we know what's best for you. Because they're being paid. It's a Game of Thrones. They're being paid. They're being bought. Trump was co-opted his first term. He was surrounded by the worst people. I couldn't have picked worse people to surround myself with than Trump did. And he's doing it again. So what can I say? I'm sorry to get so worked up.
And before we talk about your films, because I want to talk about that and link this to talking about Trump, what is it, do you think? Obviously there's always been sort of big money in American politics, US politics, and who becomes the president or who becomes a member of Congress or whatever. It's always about money, isn't it? But do you feel when you have one of the world's most, I think, is he the most wealthy man in the world? I'm not sure, but you have Elon Musk.
Yeah,
who is
$400 billion.
A multi-billionaire. It's just his wealth has just literally gone up since the Trump presidency as well. Who's been given a very pivotal position in his administration. Do you feel that's unprecedented? Is this kind of a new thing we're seeing now, where someone like that has got so much power, or what do you think it represents?
Well, I'm getting kind of a kick out of it because he's like hanging out constantly at Mar-a-Lago now with Trump. It's almost like Trump, he's like his shadow.
Very close, don't they? Yeah.
Very close. Elon gave him, $150 million toward his election. And now Bezos is giving him $1 million toward the inauguration. Miriam Adelson gave Trump over, I think, a good $100 million so that he would be even more pro-Israel than he already is. And our Senate, our Congress keeps voting to send more money to Ukraine and Israel. And I'm going to tell you, Debbie, I am so heartsick. We have people freezing to death in tents in North Carolina and
Yeah.
from the flooding. I mean, they have done very little for those people, and we are sending money to the border. We are sending money to Ukraine and more money to Israel, and people are screaming about it, but they don't care.
No, completely. We have exactly the same problem here, Mary Ellen. Millions, billions, sorry, I should say, billions have been sent again by the new Labour government we've got here. And we've got exactly the same issue. People have just elected a new Labour government around just a few months before Trump was elected, on the belief, I think, for some of the people that voted, although there was more people that didn't vote. And on that point, I think we've got a link, I don't know if Martin can show it, that shows actually that even though it was presented as a kind of a Trump landslide, apparently more people didn't vote than did this time, which I thought was very interesting, which was exactly the same for Keir Starmer. Martin's going to show don't know if you can see that, Mary Ellen.
Yes, I can. I lean forward.
What a circus. So this is, sorry, I think, we just go back up. What a circus. Eligible US voters on why they didn't vote in the 2024 presidential election. And then it says, it's a little bit smaller, nearly 90 million Americans didn't vote. And that was 90 million Americans didn't vote, which is more than the number of people who voted for Trump or Harris. Which we had the same here. It was more people didn't vote than did vote for Labour. It was they had a very small vote share. So again, you've got the same problem as we have. I mean, it's been presented as this landslide. He's come in and he's really popular, and the same here with Labour. But are people disconnected then, Mary Ellen? Do you think? Are they?
Yes. Yeah, well, I will say this about the United States. We have this great democratic constitutional republic, but we've always had about 90 million people who do not vote. So that's actually a very common thing. And I don't know if it's apathy, but a lot of people voted this time and they switched parties. We had a lot of people of color and minorities and people of Hispanics and Black people voting for Trump. And when you lose that vote, the Democrats they're doomed. They have to get a certain percentage of them or they will lose. So something was in the air, and Trump became the standard for the working people. And the Democrat Party, especially here in Minnesota, because it's called the DFL here, the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, because they had the farmers in Minnesota, and we have the big mining thing up in northern Minnesota with the iron ore. That was a big part. So the Democrats have had control of this state for a very long time, and everything's kind of flipped a little bit because people are tired of it. They're tired of the inflation. They're tired of the woke stuff, all of that.
Yeah. So it's is it the control? I mean, would you say? I mean, I know we're saying they're all the same ultimately, but here I will concede, and I come from what's classed a left-wing background, whatever the hell that means. Labour. I was a Labour activist for a long time. And I look at those people now that are still involved in all that. And I see them as absolute control freaks, because they are, Mary Ellen, they are control freaks. And what the impression I get with the states as well is that the Democrats are, I don't know, I'm not saying the Republicans are, there's this control freakery. Do you feel that it's more so with the Democrats than the Republicans? Is that why they've lost that support, do you think?
Yes, because people are starting to wake up to what tyranny is and how, I've always said you can take all the isms. You can take capitalism, socialism, communism. You can take monarchy. I don't care what it is. Whatever that your favorite form of government is, there will always be a wealthy oligarchy that comes to the top. And there's going to be a whole sea of people that are going to become the middle class or even lower, the serfs. And I've seen it happen. You can look at history and see that happen. And the whole thing with the United States is we were an experiment in having a very large middle class with very little, not a bloated bureaucracy. The European Union has 10,000 unelected bureaucrats. And when I learned that, I went, oh my goodness, what does that mean the United States have? We are all being controlled by unelected bureaucracies. Even though you left the EU, you guys have unelected bureaucracies running things. They're writing the rules.
Oh gosh, it's dreadful in the UK. It's just horrendous. Everything is bureaucratic. Yeah.
That's right. And these are a lot of people who are control freaks running everything. And that's what scares me about Musk. And maybe we can do a whole other show about that. But he's big on the surveillance state and everybody in EVs and, 15-minute cities, but Trump calls them freedom cities. So they're going to be okay because Trump has a different name for what will essentially be a police state. And that's what scares me about Trump's wanting to do mass deportation. I don't like what's happened with our illegal and migrant waves that have come. Guess what? What if the solution, the problem reaction solution, as David Icke likes to say, is going to be that, hey, we're going to fix it for you by having an incredible surveillance state where everybody's got to have an ID. We'll know everything about you. And when you have that ID, then we're not going to have to worry about the migrants and the illegal aliens. I mean, I don't trust any of it. I have to tell you.
So I mean, and I think this is what's happening as well. And I think people haven't cottoned onto it yet. Because as you said, people are looking at words and they're not looking at actions. Although if you look enough at the words, some of the statements are there that people, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on, I think, when people read what Trump says or what Musk says, and they're forgetting the rest of it. That this guy has put chips in monkey's brain, in a human brain. Tesla cars are one of the biggest forms of surveillance in modern society. And then you've got all of a sudden, which I find terrifying, all these robots being pushed for domestic use, for use in the workplace, robots that can do everything, Tesla robots. I saw one the other day that was cutting someone's hair and it was actually doing an okay job where you don't need a hairdresser anymore. So even things that you think, they can't take those kind of jobs, creative jobs.
Yeah.
And I just find the pace of this, all of a sudden we've got this bill going through here in the UK, Maryland, for digital ID, which is all of a sudden it's here with the and it's it's moving very, very quickly. And that's what I say to people, and I don't know if you agree, is don't look at what's being presented, because it all seems, lovely, someone that's will speak out and say things that he shouldn't, because he comes over like that, doesn't he? Like he'll a bit of a kind of a maverick, but actually look at what is behind that a little bit more. So you've got Trump, you've got Musk, you've also got, just before we move on and we talk before we finish about this New World Order and your films, because I think that's really important. What about RFK Jr. then? Because obviously he's done a lot, hasn't he, to promote alternative health, natural health.
Yes, he's good.
About
I really like him. He's somebody else. He came to Minneapolis a few years ago, right before COVID, and I got to meet him because we have a gal here who's a real vaccine activist, and she knows him very well. He came, and I was in the cloakroom with him and had a chance to chat with him. He's a real person. I hesitate to say this. There's certain things that he will not talk about. And I don't like how that Rabbi Shmuley kind of co-opted him. So, because I know how he feels about us getting involved in wars and stuff, but he's pretty good on the health stuff. But I wish he would talk more about the mRNA stuff that's coming down the pike and less about the food coloring and Fruit Loops. I think I'm always worried about limited hangouts. And even though I really like RFK Jr., I think he's brilliant. I think he should have been allowed in the debates when he was running for president, all of that. But remember, he's not anti-jab. He thinks we can have safe jabs. And I don't agree with that. I don't think there should be any jabs unless it's for something that if you get that disease, you will 100% die from miserably. And other than that, I think teaching people about health and sunshine and eating correctly, but he doesn't mention Monsanto and Bayer and what the chemicals they're spraying on our food and the jabs. And there's 100 new vaccines in the pipeline waiting, and they're putting mRNA in everything. They're going to put it in
Yeah.
every animal vaccine. They're going to put it in the plants. Are we going to be able to escape?
Exactly. So do you feel, if I may ask, is it a bit of if I can use the term window dressing? Is this all a bit of window dressing from Trump to appease his supporters for now that's got him into office? Is that what it is?
I think some of it is, maybe not all of it. And, they always put their top people in the real key positions to make sure that the agenda is followed. And then he'll throw the Patriots, a few bones. He did that back in 2016 too, to kind of keep us distracted. But I'm just like, and I have friends that are just absolute Trump worshipers. He does something, I point it out, and they go, Mary Ellen, you don't understand. He knows what he's doing. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. And then I was told it's not 4D chess anymore. It's now 5D chess. He so knows what he's doing, and he's got a plan behind a plan behind a plan. And he's just exposing these people. So it's like, I feel like I can't say anything because they trust him so much that even after things go south, they still say, well, it's like a lot of people believed he was still president after he lost in 2020. Did you know that? There's a whole group of people that said he's still the president. He's running things from Florida. And there's a whole cabal of military that are ready to take control at any moment. And
I did hear something about that. I mean, during the lockdown here, we had this, if I may say so, I thought it was ridiculous. And I thought it was a huge distraction from being proper activism, which, as you know, I strongly believe in proper activism, because to me, it's the only way to change things is to act as human beings. But there was this whole thing about Trump is working with, and I think they brought even Mel Gibson into this, to get, what's it called? I can't remember the name of to get the children. They're in the tunnels under the ground.
The tunnels, yeah.
And they're going to save the children. And I had people, Mary Ellen, and I was out on marches and protests and out doing stuff all over the place, come up to me and say, Debbie, don't worry. It's coming to save us. We don't need to do nothing. They're under the ground right now. The White House. That's it. Sorry, the White House.
The White House. Yeah.
That's it. And I used to think, what? And I instantly just felt like this anything that stops you from acting, to me, is a deliberate distraction. And I did hear a lot of this stuff. I did. And who do you think, can I ask you quite a difficult question? Who do you think is putting out these ideas, and why? Why are they doing that? That there's these magical, mysterious people that are coming to save us.
Well,
who's doing that?
It's controlled opposition. I believe it's, I've kind of always believed that our CIA works together with your MI6, and they work together with Mossad and whatever else, intelligence agency. These are all intelligence and military operations. And I will give you something fun to look up on your own. You can go, I believe you can even find it on Wikipedia. There was a thing back during the Bolshevik Revolution called the Trust, where it was the same thing, the Trust. And it was, I think, and they made a movie about it, Riley, Ace of Spies, and it was about how there's a secret white hat organization that's going to come and save all of you people from the communists and the Bolsheviks and all this kind of stuff. So they put that out there to get everybody to go, well, I guess we don't have to worry now. And exactly what you said, it kind of makes people, I really had friends and people I know that say, just trust the plan. Trump's still in control. They know what they're doing. Trust the plan. Trust the plan. Yeah. Yeah. It's still going on. So Trump still has a plan. And they just think he is like the smartest creature. And now, of course, Elon Musk, who basically wants to download our brains into machines and put 20,000 satellites above us, that, these people are all coming to save the day. I don't want 20,000 satellites above me. I don't want to download myself. I don't want to lose my humanity. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to a robot instead of you.
No, well, but this is what I struggle to understand, why people can't see what's in front of them. It's in front of you. They want robots to take over. I think there's even a video of him being interviewed where he said he wants his robots to take over everything. He actually says it. Do not people not see this is your jobs, this is your children's jobs, their future? Because if the only thing that's ever allowed them to keep us alive, and I know this is going to sound really blunt and horrible, I'm very, very negative. But I don't, we are just human, literally human capital. We are
That's
just money. We're not people. We're not human beings to these people. We're profit. We're profit margins. And now if they can get robots to come in, Musk's robots or God knows what other robots they've got, all sorts of things, AI as well, to do what we can do, they don't need us anymore, do they? And I keep saying to people, do you not see that? We're exposed, you know, we're what's the word? Disposable.
Expendable. Yeah, disposable.
Expendable, disposable. And I ask questions as well. I don't know how you feel about this. Are people linking this to the idea of depopulation? I mean, we've got an excess. I don't know what it is there, Mary Ellen. We've got an excess death rate here in the UK at the moment of about 1,500 people a month. And we've also got growing evidence that the jabs from the lockdown that we've been talking about this evening are causing huge health problems for people, that are linked to the death rate, and also record numbers of cancers are being diagnosed. I think was it 1,000 a day? I said, wasn't it, the other day? Was it a week or a day? A day. 1,000 people a day in the UK are being diagnosed with cancer, which is unprecedented. And it's like, hello. Why is anyone asking any questions? You know, it's so. What do you think? I mean, how do you see this big picture that's forming? What is it that they're taking us to? What is this world taking us to?
It is depopulation, and of course, you know, one of the big groups they want to get rid of are the elderly, what they call, you know, the useless eaters. And so that's why they're presenting all of this euthanasia in so many countries. And I've gotten in discussions with people. People, well, I want the ability to be able to decide that I'm in too much pain. I want to end my life. I understand all that. But the problem, everything's a slippery slope. And this is going to go to the place where someone will be making that decision for you. Now, remember that movie Logan's Run? Did you ever see that? As soon as you hit 33,
I do remember that.
I know it sounds like science fiction. And, you know, what they're doing to these old people. My sister worked in a care facility. It was assisted living. But she goes, there was 1 year where they came out with before COVID, they came out with the senior turbocharged flu shots. She goes, we went from losing 1 a month. All of a sudden, we were having 4 or 5 a month of the elderly going to the hospital or dying in their rooms. And she goes, I know. And of course, it's anecdotal, but she watched it happen year after year after they started introducing that shot. And I said, well, this has to be connected. It's like one that's like 3 times as strong that you give to a frail 90-year-old. You know, and so they want us dead. They want us out of our houses, out of our gas-fueled cars. We are the carbon they want to get rid of, and they want the children's minds, and they want all the elderly, especially of people that were of my generation and a little older. They want us gone. And your son, who I was very happy to meet, that generation, I've actually talked to some of those kids, and they think this new technology is the best thing since peanut butter. And I'll tell you what, I understand why. That's all they know. You and I, at least even you, we were raised with a whole different, a human aspect to everything. I'm not against technology. I'm not a Luddite, but I'm telling you, I'm becoming one. Okay. This is getting way out of hand. Yeah. This is really getting out of hand. I don't want everywhere I go. I mean, I just got back from Paris, and my last couple international trips, I didn't know that I didn't have to show my passport anymore. They're snapping your picture. And I never even said you could do that. They just started doing it. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm in the system now. I already was, because I worked for the airline. So I had a FBI background check and all of that. But we're not giving our permission, and they're just making assumptions. They have all of us. There's not going to be a way to escape, because most of us don't know how to live well off the grid. And it's very difficult even for those people.
No, that's really interesting and poignant what you've just said, because I think that says it all. And it's not a nice thing to discuss. And I've said this to a lot of people, and I don't think they like it. And I think a lot of people in this country In the UK, as you know, we're a tiny country. We're very small geographically.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that I've spoken to over the last 4 years who have talked about going off and having an off-grid community where they think they can just escape it all. And I said to them, we're not living in the 1930s, or even then it was hard, very hard to try and escape.
Yeah.
We're not living in, I mean, even the States, such a vast country, there's probably a little bit more of a chance of hiding away in the middle of nowhere. But there's people who seem to think that they can escape. And I don't mean this to put people down or scare people, because to me, and I think we have to be realistic about what we face, this is all out fascist surveillance on every level of our lives, and everything that we need, they already control it, to be honest. It's just going to go even further, whether it's water or electricity, the basic things that we need, which is why I always say, and I don't know how you feel, Mary Ellen, is our only hope is to put our differences aside and act and not comply. Do not, we keep saying that, don't we? Piers, you've met the lovely Piers Corbyn.
Yes.
He always says, doesn't he? You remember, resist, defy,
do not
comply. And that is it, isn't it? That's what we have to do. I mean, what do you think? I mean, can we stop this? Can we?
We can in little ways, because it's going to involve forming parallel communities eventually. But I really believe that, for instance, what I said about Trump's plan to, eventually have checkpoints and have IDs and passports for everybody to be able to move freely. This isn't right now, but it's coming down the pike. But
yeah.
But it will, people who support Trump and the patriotic people will say, don't worry, everybody, this is all part of the plan. It's going to work out for us. Don't worry. This is what concerns me, because this is how things are done incrementally, iteratively, and it's a slow, like a boiling of the frog. You've heard about that. It's a slow boiling, and by the time we realize how far we've been roped into the pen, it will be too late. Now, I'm a Christian. I know how the book ends. I really have hope in God, but even in the meantime, that doesn't mean we let it go. We have to fight back, even in the little things. I have quit a couple businesses because they won't take cash. I'm doing my part in the little ways. And I try to encourage my friends and family to do the same. But everybody's all relaxed now because Trump's in. So, like there's only so much you can do. So, but, we've got stuff going on overseas. We've got, the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. And, these people, these people are psychopaths, Debbie. They want war. They do want to take us to war. So that's a whole other show, but we've got that to think about as well.
Yeah. And there's so much, as we said before, that we could talk about, and we could be here all, I should say evening, afternoon for you. Obviously, 6 hours behind us in the United States. But I mean, obviously, we've been talking for a while. If we could just finish off by, obviously, let's talk about the films that you're involved in that are produced. Tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, your latest film, I think that very much links to what we've been talking about, doesn't it?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that film?
Sure. We were very fortunate to interview a really great, diverse group of people. And it's kind of sad because there was so much more we could have been into the film. It's based on 2 books by a man named James Perloff. He wrote a book back about 35 years ago or so called The Shadows of Power, about the Council on Foreign Relations and the wars and everything like that. Well, we expanded it and kind of brought things up to speed. We do not go into 9/11 because that's been done so much, but we go back all the way to the founding of the Council on Foreign Relations, back right after World War I. And we even take it back further, back to the USS Maine, back in 1898, 1900, when we started the Spanish-American War based on the lie that Spain blew up our ship, the USS Maine, in Havana Harbor, which they did not. But the press took it over and made Spain, because they wanted to go to war to get the big money people here in the States wanted the sugar in Cuba. So the big Chase Bank and the big corporations, we got to get Spain out of Cuba. So they rallied everybody behind, that Spain was massacring nuns and priests and they blew up our ship. None of it was true. And that, so we go back into that, but we bring it up to the present. And we talk a lot about the media and how they packaged presidents to get them elected, how they, for instance, how they made Jimmy Carter look like JFK on the cover of Time magazine. And we do we have a great section, especially for a lot of people who listen, because I was a teenager when the Vietnam War started, very young teenager. And in fact, I know that Kennedy didn't want to escalate it. And of course, LBJ did. We've got a great section on Vietnam, on World War I and the Lusitania, on Pearl Harbor, how the American people after World War I said, we don't want to get involved. We want to be isolationists. So 80% of the American people did not want to get involved in another war. And we had broken Code Purple, invaded Japan into I'm not saying we shouldn't have gotten involved in World War II. I'm just saying nobody wanted to, but the powers that be, we needed to have the World War, regardless of how you feel about Hitler, Neville Chamberlain, Stalin. Everything got very, it's all very nuanced. But there's a great book called Hitler, Churchill, and the Unnecessary War. I mean, it's interesting how they get us into these wars, and then they divide up the world. I don't like it that in Tehran, they divided up the world and gave 1/3 of the world to Stalin. Like how, in the British Mandate back after World War I, if you don't understand history and how the world was divided up and what we did to people, what happened to the people in Germany and Austria and Poland after World War I, how, we've messed with borders, we've hurt people's lives, we've slaughtered people and provided the means for people to be slaughtered. So we kind of cover a lot of this. We connect a lot of the dots on how all this came about with the Council on Foreign Relations, and these people plan and manipulate the media to get people behind wars, like the woman who was the actress that did the Saddam Hussein babies in the incubator. It was a huge lie. She was an actress. The Iraqis weren't taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the floor. Huge lie, huge. She was the daughter of the ambassador.
A little bit like Al Qaeda, Islamic State, which, for those that are listening that have looked into this, is something that I've really researched over the last, 20 years. And I posted a quote the other day, Mary Ellen, from our former Foreign Secretary called Robin Cook, who resigned shortly after. He said that people don't realize that Al-Qaeda, there's no such thing as Al-Qaeda. It's just a database that the CIA use where they train the mercenaries. And that obviously our MI5 are involved as well. And I think other countries are involved in training them as well. But there is no so-called Islamic army. It's just an idea, isn't it? So people are scared and they think, there's an army that's really dangerous, that's terrorists. So it's the same thing. It's always the same playbook, isn't it? That they
exactly. We created it. Britain helped create it. We call it Al-Qaeda. That's what it is. And Al-Nusra, the Mujahideen, the money we've spent to fight Russia through our proxy wars. So many innocent people have been slaughtered. I am so sick from it all. And I'm not really a pacifist. I am so for having a good military, and you only use it in true defensive purposes. You don't become the policeman of the world. You don't do regime change. I'm so sick of the regime change. We've been very naughty, Debbie. We've been very, very naughty.
Yeah.
So you can end it with that.
We've matched you up the whole way, haven't we? So we were just as bad. I mean, all the so-called Five Eyes country, the intelligence network of countries that work together and share intelligence and work together. Australia, Canada, United States, all these so-called divisions they're making out there is between those countries now, which to me is complete nonsense as well. They all, as you said, that all these people work together. So this film then, sorry, remind me the name of the film, because you said it today. I did watch it, but
it's called Shadow Ring.
Shadow Ring.
All one word.
Okay.
And yes, and we were fortunate to get the actor, he's a friend of mine, Kevin Sorbo, to do the narrating. And then we had 17 people we interviewed and covered a lot of these subjects and touched on some others. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I always suggest people watch it in pieces, because there's so much information. And you go to freemindfilms.com, you can watch the trailers for all three, and you can watch it for free, but you have to maybe watch a couple commercials. I think you guys have access to Tubi and Amazon over there, so I think you can find it.
Okay, so we're just going to show a 3-minute clip of this film, so people can then find it at your website, freemindfilms.com. But we're just going to play this trailer for a few minutes.
Part of the reason we went into Iraq was the main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't, but he had the capacity to make weapons of mass destruction. But I also talked about the human suffering in Iraq, and I also talked the need to advance a freedom agenda.
To have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI.
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
The event seems to be something other than what it truly is.
They're playing chess while we're not even playing checkers yet.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You're now hitting critical mass.
And he says you won the 2004 election.
Because if you listen to most media, a conspiracy theorist or conspiracies are all urban legends.
I think that we have noticed over the years that some of the events that led up to war were not accidental.
My vital need was the information available in Washington from the intercepted dispatches, which told when and where Japan would probably strike.
Could we have been lied to about everything? Is that even possible?
So the whole thing's a fraud to begin with.
People get caught up in debating if MSNBC has a better perspective than Fox News or ABC, NBC. These are a very narrow window of information.
If you don't toe the line, if you're not official corporate media, it doesn't matter how big your audience is. We're going to control the conversation. If you can be an appropriate mouthpiece for government, if you're not going to challenge the paradigm of statism, we will give you access.
So if you understand who these people are, and you understand what their mission is and how they think and what their ideology is, then most of the mysteries of the modern world, how come we're getting into this mess, or why are we doing this, and so forth, they become easy to answer.
And every one of those people knew it was a lie, and they sacrificed the lives of 60,000 American boys.
All human authority is jurisdictional and limited.
The fact is, the superclass exists. That's the problem.
What kind of world government will this be? It might even be worse than war.
Without a massive shift in global consciousness, it's impossible.
If you had a one world government, it would set up the most unrestrained tyranny in history.
I'm going to make an effort to watch the whole film. I haven't had time to do it because I just got the link today. So thank you.
Don't worry. Like I said, I'm hoping you can access it. Our distributor said he believes that all English-speaking countries can. Tubi is an app you can download, and you can find it on there. And there's supposedly Amazon. It's listed at the bottom of the website, all the places you can find it to watch it. So.
Okay, so hopefully everyone that's watching can check that out, and your other films as well on the website, freemindfilms.com. So Mary Ellen, obviously we've been talking for quite some time now. If I may, and there's so much more I'd love to talk to you about. I know we've talked the times that we've met, but if we can round up then, because obviously we're sort of trying to bring this together from the United States, UK, about how we've got all this it's pretty much the same thing that's happening. It's just maybe in slightly different ways, but it all adds up to the same thing. So what would you say finally to people that are watching about, obviously we're coming towards the end of the year. We've got another year coming with lots of things that are developing, as we've talked about. What do you say to people about how we deal with this that's coming? This looming war, if I may say so, and that sounds so horrible, but looming war, technocracy, we've talked about Elon Musk, this takeover digitally. What would you say to people? What do we do? How do we respond?
Well, I think what you just said is true. I think we have to, it's really going to come down to the little things, but we have to, I always say, stay frosty. Remain very vigilant, even with these people that you think are saying and doing the right thing. And then, call them on it with your friends. Sadly, sometimes we have to develop a very thick skin. You have one. I'm still working on mine because I okay.
I try.
It's really difficult because you find yourself, people have unfriended me. I was called delusional on Facebook because I said something negative about Elon Musk. She said, you're delusional. Like, okay, I'm delusional. But we have to keep calling them out. And what you are doing, what Martin is doing, what my friends are doing that have podcasts, I really believe we have to keep listening, stay tuned as much as we can, appear on each other's podcast, read and listen. Because if we can, I'm big on, obviously it's harder to do with somebody in France or Spain, but right now we can do it with the English speaking countries. We can do it with Canada and the UK. And I think these are the lines. Watch free speech. Watch what they're doing. You said someone was arrested. They're doing that here. Did you know we have a governor that went over to Israel to sign away free speech rights in the state of Florida? He went over to Israel to do it.
He went over to Israel to do it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I'm appalled, and nobody's outraged. I'm like,
and again,
free speech.
Again, why aren't people asking who's running the show here? Who's running? Yeah.
Well, what Voltaire, to learn who's in control, find out who you can't criticize. Just saying.
That is a very powerful quote. To find out who controls you, who can't you criticize. Yeah, absolutely. And who's allowed to criticize, and who gets away with saying things as well. That's also very interesting. The other side of it is when we're trying to sort of work out who we can trust. And I know that's really hard in this world.
It is. But we can listen and learn. And even some of the people that we don't quite trust give out good information, people. And if people wake up because of whoever, Alex Jones or Russell Brand or whoever, if they get seeds planted and they go, wait a minute, I never thought of that. That sets things in motion. So I still think we have to encourage everybody gets to talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? Even if we don't agree, we must always fight for each other's right to speak up. Even if it's someone that's for, all this man-made climate stuff that we've been bombarded with, it's being used to bring in all this new stuff. Even those people, I know those people from when I was involved with the left in this country, because they've all gone crazy with that stuff. They love it.
They have, and ours have too.
They have the right to say it and protest about it, even though I don't like what they're protesting about.
Remember, we have to get our mindset to it's, as you said, good versus evil, but also liberty versus tyranny. Who's on the side of tyranny and who's on the side of liberty? And we need to define what liberty is. We've always defined it by our right to free speech and our gun rights and everything like that, and our freedom from surveillance and illegal search and seizure. Our Bill of Rights is very important, and no one really has that with teeth. And I see Martin is here. I guess we need to wrap it up. So
anyway, I'm going to have to end it there. I think that's really wise words to end on, actually, is good versus evil, freedom versus tyranny. That's what it is, isn't it? Can we all... We agree, we all forget the rest of it, and it's just that at the moment. It's that. And come together.
That's it.
As we've done with this transatlantic conversation.
We're doing it. This right here we're doing it. So now I can, if it's possible, I'm going to hopefully be able to share this with some folks, and it's wonderful. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate Martin. Thank you so much for having me on. What a treat.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. We've come to the end of the podcast. Thank you all for listening. And next week we have got the amazing Paul Burgess, who's a climate scientist, who's coming on to talk to us about how the idea of man-made climate change is being used to take our rights away, and how he's going to go through all some of that in kind of layman's terms for us and talk through how it's being used. So that's going to be a good one. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.